What's up, everybody? I'm Tyler, and I'm not gonna mess around here. I'm just gonna jump into it. How does the idea of talking about dating sound to you? Now, I guess it probably depends, doesn't it? It depends on who you're talking about dating with. Like, talking about your crush with your friends, not that big of a deal. It's like, who do you like? I'm not gonna tell you. Like, that's no problem. Talking or writing about dating in your journal doesn't seem too risky. Like, you can't see that. Now, but talking to your parents or your group leader here at church, whoa, pause, what? Now, to some of you, that right there, that might sound super awkward. Or honestly, maybe for you, it doesn't seem that awkward. It's no big deal, in which case, very good. But here's my point. But really, no matter how you feel about it, I think talking about dating, sex, sexual desires, and all the stuff that comes with it is too important to just skip over. I know that not everyone is allowed to date yet, and I know that not everyone wants to date yet, but I think it's important to have conversations like this one here at church because I want the best for you in all things, including dating. And I also know that what's best for you when it comes to dating can be really difficult to figure out. We see movies, TV shows, and influencer couples that give us these like too good to be true images of dating and relationships all the time. But here's the thing, dating and relationships aren't always picture perfect. You actually might have experienced this in your own relationships, or you've just noticed it in the adult relationships around you. They can be like awkward or frustrating or disappointing, confusing, messy, or just weird. The truth is that relationships can be less than perfect sometimes. I'd guess you could probably talk to almost any adult or older teenager in your life who has their own less than perfect dating story. And that's because dating just has the potential to be awkward. But knowing that, many of us still probably have an idea of what we hope a dating relationship might be like. Maybe right now we feel like we're ready to date, but we aren't allowed yet. Or maybe dating is all our friends seem to be talking about, but we just don't really care that much. Maybe we want to date somebody, but no one has seemed to notice us yet. Or maybe we've just started dating for the first time. When we think about dating, we tend to focus a lot on what we want the relationship to look like. We think about who we want to date, what we want the relationship to be like, and all the kind of stuff that we would want to do together. And while all of that stuff is definitely important to consider, I think when it comes to talking about dating and relationships, we often forget to ask what we should be focusing on before we even start dating. It's important because this answer impacts what dating looks like for us and even who we choose to date. Look, if you're even thinking, this is deep and all, but I'm not even trying to date right now, I get it. But it's an important question for us to ask because I think we're laying the foundation for our future relationships right now. So even if you're not dating or not interested in dating right now, understanding what we should be thinking about when it comes to relationships and dating is important. So when it comes to dating relationships, where do we look for help? How can we make sure we're focusing on the right things when it comes to dating both now and in the future? Well, there's actually some pretty old advice that might be helpful for us today. A couple thousand years ago, a guy named Paul wrote a letter to the Christians in a town called Corinth. Now, Paul was a guy whose life had been completely changed by Jesus. After encountering him, Paul started sharing the message of Jesus with people all over the world. And one of the places Paul went to spread this message was Corinth. After he'd spent time in the city, Paul wrote the people there a message to remind them of what God says is best for them. In this first letter to the Corinthians, Paul included a couple of sentences that can help us here and now. In fact, I think it's exactly the kind of stuff we should think about when it comes to dating and relationships. Check this out. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. So here, Paul listed what God says love actually looks like. Patient, kind, faithful, hopeful, lasting. When we think of that kind of love, isn't it exactly what we want other people to give us? I mean, honestly, don't we usually think about the type of love Paul mentioned as being about the other person in the relationship? Like, we want them to be patient. We'd like them to be kind. We hope they're faithful. But when we read a list like this, we usually see it as a long list of the things we want to find in the person we're dating. And to be clear, that's not bad at all. God does want us to have this kind of love in all of our relationships. He wants us to look for these types of characteristics in other people when it comes to everything from friendships to dating. But we shouldn't just look for them in other people. Instead of focusing on finding all this great stuff in other people, we need to stop and look at ourselves. We need to consider if we're that kind of person as well. Becoming the person God made us to be is so important. And a huge part of that is allowing God to develop all the characteristics on Paul's list in ourselves. What Paul wrote about 2,000 years ago is still what our lives and our love should be made of today. No matter if you choose to date or not, one step you can take toward becoming the person God created you to be is to practice sexual integrity. Basically, that means choosing to respond to the sexual things we feel, think, and desire in a way that respects ourselves, others, and God. Dating may be a very real way for you to learn to live out the important characteristics Paul wrote about. But you don't have to wait until you start dating to practice sexual integrity or to learn to live out these important characteristics. In fact, we actually need to put these characteristics into practice before we even think about dating someone else. Think about it like this. Focus on becoming love before looking for love. So, I don't know where you are with all this dating stuff. Maybe you're already dating, or you're not allowed to date. Maybe you're waiting to date someone, or you're just not ready or interested at all. Now, that's all okay. Wherever you are, you have the opportunity right now to live out the characteristics of love that Paul wrote about in his letter to the Corinthians. The reality is that God has given us all the power we need to become the type of people He wants us to be. So instead of using dating as a way to look for like the right person, let's focus on developing the characteristics of love that Paul listed for us. Let's focus on becoming love before looking for love. So, okay, how can we do this? First, pick one, just one, of the characteristics on Paul's list that you want to develop in yourself. Maybe you could use more patience, or you'd like to be quicker to forgive, or you want to cut back on those rude comments you make about the people you care about the most. But what if you just started by picking just one characteristic in yourself that you'd like to grow? Then practice what you pick. Seriously. If you have a tendency to be rude to those you love, practice giving compliments to them on purpose instead. Or if you tend to be impatient, practice being patient in your responses to people this week. Or instead of holding a grudge, practice bringing up and talking through something that hurts your feelings. Now, none of this is easy, not easy. That's okay, because all of it can be so good. Real love takes a ton of work. And if we're gonna become love before looking for love, we're gonna need to focus on growing the characteristics necessary to be the type of person we would wanna date. A person who is kind, patient, honest, humble, hopeful, and all of the other things that Paul mentioned. Dating can definitely be awkward, but it won't always be that way. And when you choose to focus on the stuff that's important before you start dating, you're taking a step in the right direction. When you develop the characteristics God wants you to have and treat the other person the way He created you to, it can help you practice sexual integrity both now and in future relationships. Just imagine if for you, dating could be a really positive experience for you and the person you're dating. Even if you're not dating yet, what if focusing on becoming the loving person God created you to be could set you up for a better dating life if and when that day comes? Imagine if choosing to focus on becoming love before looking for love sets you up to have the best dating life possible. I know it might feel early to talk about dating for some of you, but it's never too early to become the person that God created you to be. That's why we've spent the last 4 weeks talking about sex and sexual desires here at church. And even though those topics can be awkward to talk about, I really believe they are important conversations we need to have, especially in middle school. And we don't want the conversation just to stop here. That's why you have your group leader and your group. Today, I want you to keep the conversation about dating going with your group. If nothing else, you can encourage each other to build characteristics that help you grow in love with each other. I think that's a pretty cool place to start.